So maybe to begin with, Najah, we can dive in. We were talking earlier about purpose and permission,
Yeah.
and purpose in the context of what is my purpose in this life, in this human incarnation. And for some of us, for the rare of us, I think it's pretty easy from the get-go. They hit the ground running. I was definitely not one of them. And I think for most of us, if I'm correct, I hope it is a bit of a challenge to figure that out. So I'd actually seen a Facebook video of yours with that title. So maybe you can start with that and speak about your own journey and how you came about on this theme.
Yeah, no, it's a big theme that I've definitely kind of like struggled with for the majority of my life. There's certain people that are born and they know exactly what they want to do, right? Hit the ground running, and they know exactly what they want to do from birth. They want to be a doctor, they want to be an artist, whatever the case may be. That was not me. And Kanan, you said that wasn't you as well. Like, it was more about I had to figure it out, and it's challenging when there's so many other paradigms that are seriously, it's a paradigm. So the paradigms that are around us that really are trying to guide us and shape us in certain ways, whether it's a religious paradigm, the school paradigms, the different forms of schooling, and the parental paradigms with certain ways of parenting. There's all these structures that are kind of around us for our whole lives, and especially while we're growing up, right? And they do serve a purpose. But at the same time, for the ones that don't really know what their purpose is in life, they can be very stifling. And my whole journey from the time of being a little child was like bumping up against those paradigms and being like, no, like, I don't like that. That doesn't resonate with me. That doesn't feel good. I did know one thing I did know at an early age for me was that, it's really important for it to feel right in my body. And if it didn't feel right, then I wasn't going to do it. Like, I'm a Capricorn, so I'm very, very stubborn in that way. So I really gave my parents room for their money, but with really good reason, because I really knew from an early age that certain things weren't going to fly for me. And so, I had to go through this journey of figuring out like truly what my purpose is, because there's all this excess noise telling us what our purpose is. And, as a woman, my purpose is to be a mother. I'm supposed to be a wonderful daughter. I'm supposed to be a supportive sister and a supportive friend. There's all these ways that I'm supposed to interact with the world. But the one piece that was missing was like, how do I truly want to interact with the world in a way that like completely makes my heart sing? And so in order to get to that place, it's like, you really are it was a process of like shedding and allowing, and this is where the idea of permission comes into play, because we have to understand that we are way more than the paradigms that have been put onto us, and way more than the ideas that the rest of the world has about how I'm supposed to live my life. You have to let go of those. And then once you let go of them, then you have to actually physically say aloud, I give myself permission to feel this way, to be this way, to do this thing, to be as loud as I can possibly be, whatever the case may be. You literally have to give yourself permission, because on the soul level, like the deepest level of who we are as these beings in these physical bodies, the soul, like that's where it's like, they're like contracts that are like stamped on that deep level. So that's why it's important, like the spoken word and saying like, I give myself permission, because it's almost as if like you're rewriting the stories that were like stamped on your soul from like a really young age. And that's where all of our power really truly lies, is like once you like remove, you shed these outside influences, you shed them all. And then you stand up and you say, like, I give myself permission to go into the field of helping animals. I give myself full permission to step outside of the paradigm of working 9 to 5 and find my way. When you give yourself permission, it's like all of a sudden you get like this like this nice push behind you, and they're like, oh, okay, I'm finding it, So that's been my personal experience with it. And I've definitely worked with a lot of patients and clients in the past that have really struggled with figuring that out and realizing that there are these constraints that are on them. And it's like, awareness and bringing awareness into your life, and how that is like how we truly awaken, and that's how we like become enlightened beings, is like becoming aware of all the things that are attached to us, and then making the conscious choice to free yourself from that. And then once all of that stuff is gone, then you can really easily like align with your purpose. And then you give yourself that permission to keep going forward. And then that's when like all the blessings kind of shoot out and catapult you into a whole new level of being.
Oh, absolutely. This is so beautiful. I love the way that you said so many things. And I think that they also come along with the integration of your journey and a lot of the work that you've been doing, which we're gonna explore into. But a few things that came to me is that I totally resonate with what you said, with that there's so much of this cookie cutter that when we come into this in the earthly realms, that in most cultures it looks like they want to fit you into where are you going to fit in this machine. And as we were speaking, I was kind of jogged this memory of early parts of my life, pre-teens, where I found like that with certain things I was pretty clear of what I wanted to do. And the sad part is that I got convinced by people around me of how that was not the most reasonable route. For me, that was studying like quantum physics and reality and stuff. Yeah. And so I did not realize, I can see in hindsight how much I was infatuated and passionate about it naturally, without any effort, obsessed to the point of obsession. But it was like, oh, how are you going to make money? You're going to be like a poor teacher or something like that. Yeah. And I took away that permission. I wasn't even aware that I actually had that choice. So, yeah. And I think the system we live in, it does it to so many people. And we have what we have today. I think that's a big part, that rather than tapping into our natural enthusiasm, our natural desire, we kind of get into this confusion. And so many psychotherapy sessions later on and challenges in life kind of stem from that initial confusion. If it could only be straightened out at that early point in time.
Yep.
And yeah, so how is that reflecting? How when you're speaking with your clients, how does that? But like one of the things I heard you say is feeling it in the body. Or you said that the body intelligence, you always have that kind of connection.
Yeah. For me, physically, it always feels like you're like a little bit concave, where your shoulders might become rounded. There's like, you even might become more hunched over in the center, where you're not really like using, the power of like your solar plexus, right? Like right below your rib cage, above your belly button. It comes physically in like this forward rounding of the body. And that's what you see a lot in people that have a lot of, like a lot of baggage, a lot of stuff that they haven't really necessarily dealt with. Their shoulders will round, and you can tell when a person is like really has released things, because all of a sudden their posture gets better. Their shoulders are back, their chests are up, and if you watch them when they walk, they start to walk from the center place. Like in Chinese medicine, we call like this area, the solar plexus, and below like the dantian, which is like the field of immortal elixir is like the name of it, but it's like from where all of our power comes from. So it's like, we're not mindful of it when we walk, but that's the area that's really moving us, propelling us forward. It all comes from the center. And a lot of times you'll also notice that people are, they're rounded forward. And a lot of times externally what they're projecting is a lot of blame. It usually comes along with, when you are like really not standing in your power, and you have all these constraints on you. it usually comes in the form of like, they're talking about how everyone else is the problem. It's like all these things are bothering them. All these things are the problem. And they have this rounded forward posture. They have back problems, certain things like that. And that's always a clear indicator that they're not standing in their strength. And then for me, when I was a kid, it was just like, it felt like almost as if like I had like an internal straitjacket is like the best way I could describe it, where it was like me as a child, I was like so wild and so free. My parents were like, holy crap, like, like, what are we going to do with this child? Like, I was always dirty. Like, they were like, oh my God, out of all my sisters, I was the absolute, like, most challenging child for them. And so every time that my parents tried to reel me in, I could feel like this internal straitjacket, like closing me over, and it was uncomfortable. Like, I just remember being like, oh, no, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right. And so I would fight against it in any way that I could. I was like trying to figure out like how to outsmart my parents, how to like how to do whatever I could so that they would not try to constrain me. And it just felt like a constraining for me personally.
Wow, no, that's really beautiful. And I think one of the things that I've been observing is kids now in this part of my life. And although every kid is different, you can see how they're naturally tapped into that joy and expression of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's where the parents oftentimes or mostly try to limit that. We live in a culture where if you're laughing or you're too joyous, that's a problem. People tell you, oh, that's too much. And so one thing that came to mind is very recently, I had the privilege of spending some time. I was living in a house with some friends, and seeing how they were raising their child was a huge lesson for me in the context of the conversation we're having.
Yeah.
And they were giving their daughter, treating her as an adult, this 3 or 4 year old, as if she was an equal in table conversations to everything she did. She was not with someone with a little body and, someone who needed too much. So this freedom completely was like a friendship. And I was just seeing how that was, impacting her creativity and power of autonomy and confidence of what she wanted to create in life.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, that's so simple. Whereas the way I've seen, the opposite of that is that these kids are like victims. They don't know anything, and you have to tell them everything that they need to do. And it kind of stifles their natural expression of life.
Yeah. Do you ever see like I think it's like the age, like 4 to like 7, 8 kids. If you watch them walking down the street, they do not stop moving. They just don't. Their little bodies like cannot contain themselves. They're shaking and wiggling and spinning around in circles and making sounds and running here. They cannot sit still. And I think that's the time when I remember when I was little like that I would constantly be told, don't do that, stop that, sit here, be still, and that's a big part of what you're talking about, like stifling that creativity, because that is the child expressing, right? And then if you cut that and you tell them, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I don't know what to do. And you take away their ability to choose, and then they become reliant on the parent more. It's really interesting.
Yeah. It's learned. And I think part of the spiritual journey is to rediscover the child within, which is actually never left, but it's like I'm realizing more and more, and you could speak to that, is I find myself to be like a child in that way. And I understand that concept of what you're saying, permission.
Yeah.
I think I understand that now at a very, very subtle level, that I am innocent and I came here to express myself. And so that idea of permission resonates not from like someone giving you permission, but it's, like also it's your power that you came here. And it also feels easy now because I kind of recognize that all the people that told me what to do didn't know what they were talking about.
Yes.
So it makes it easier, because if you think that they know something, then you have to second guess yourself, or But when you know that there's so much confusion out there, it's like, oh, I had it right in the beginning.
Totally.
So yeah, only 30 years later, Najah,
Seriously.
rediscovering. Uh,
Yeah.
Man, yeah, hanging out with kids every time I get a chance it's a blessing, I find, too. They become the teachers,
Yeah.
you know. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that part of our spiritual journeys is this rediscovery of innocence. And in the wider culture, innocence is often considered maybe synonymous with weakness and stupidity. But I think it's the opposite. Innocence can be very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've in this current paradigm, we've definitely got it backwards. But thanks to a lot of us, I think we're going to shift this. So what do you tell your clients, or your people that you work with, or yourself, how to get in touch with that purpose and also permission?
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting because it depends on the person and it depends on where they are in their journey. Because for some people, they've done a little bit of work. Maybe they've had a little bit of therapy. And so they have been kind of going through some of their processes already. And then sometimes you have people that have this is a brand new topic, so it depends on like where they are on their journey. And it also depends on how connected to their own stories that they are. And that's another really big thing is like, when we've all experienced certain traumatic things in our lives that have happened to us. And when those things happen, like what we do, what we tell ourselves in order to be okay and like operate in the world going forward is a protection mechanism. And it's great that we have that. But what happens is that protection mechanism, it stays on. And so, and it never goes off. So the person is continuously like reenacting like the defense mechanisms that their programming and stories have been like dictating for their whole lives. And so it really depends. It really depends on the person and where they are in their journey. And if they have a lot of trauma, because if they do have a lot of trauma, then it's like, there's a whole bunch of like release work that has to be done on that deep level before you can even really have this conversation, So it just depends on where they are in their journey. And, I think the biggest thing to start it is having awareness, and really being in touch with how you interact with your world. And if you have good friends around you and family that can kind of mirror back to you some of the things that you were projecting, and when those things come back, to not shut down, but instead look at it with that innocence, with that question mark of being like, yeah, why do I do that? Yeah, what is that about? Really investigating it, and not in a way of creating more judgment, which creates usually negative self-talk, not in that way, more in a state of curiosity. And when you look at things through that lens, like that innocence, that childlike curiosity, when you look at yourself in that way, and you look at the things that you've gone through and the stories that you've told yourself, therefore the programming that has dictated your life, then that is usually the best way that you can start. That's like a good starting point. It's like we always have to bring awareness. Awareness is the first thing, is like how, like becoming aware of how you're interacting with the world, and how you're interacting with the opposite sex, how you're interacting with children, how you're interacting with the elderly, how you're interacting with a boss, all of these relationships. It's like, how are you approaching this? Is there some like hesitation in being open? There is. Where is that coming from? You have to kind of do your own investigative work. And in like my practice, I'm asking those questions to my patients. I'm really asking them those questions, like, how do you relate to X, Y, and Z? How do you see yourself how did you see yourself in the past when you were like this? And how do you see yourself going forward? And then, it's kind of just planting those seeds and kind of getting the juices flowing on, yeah, how do I interact? And then that creates that awareness. And then from there, once you really understand how you're interacting with the world, then you can start to rewrite those stories and programs. And then from there, that's when you start to give yourself permission. And then that's what aligns you with your purpose.
Wow. That was beautiful. Yeah, it definitely cannot be simplified. I think as you were speaking, the word that came to me was the warrior's path. It really requires a lot of courage.
Yeah.
To investigate all of that and to even bring awareness.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes I feel like maybe not in every department, but in certain areas, it can be painful. At least that's what I've experienced.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Certain parts are definitely easier, but I feel like certain relationships and certain things you don't know, but you're kind of closed off there, and trying to open that and, become vulnerable there. We need all the support we can. And that's why where it comes that attitude of being a warrior, at least that resonated with me too.
Yeah. And then for when I have patients that are like really coming up with like some difficult stuff, and then for me as a practitioner, like it's really about holding that space, just holding that space for them to like create a safe container for them to feel release, have epiphanies, whatever the case may be, just creating that container for them, that safe space and place for them to do and feel however they need to, for them in order to release,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That, I love that word release, and how you were earlier talking about the posture, and that how through that postural observation, one can, as in your case, as a healer, one can notice, what is happening, where is the contraction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things that I had heard from a spiritual teacher, which I've kept in my mind, maybe as a litmus test, is he said, when you're figuring out what is that you need to do in life, you make that decision when you're the most joyful, naturally. Mm-hmm. And once you're in that state, you fix it. And once you come back from that state, then the doubt comes in. Oh, should I be doing this? Oh, this is too hard. Then you do not change. You commit to that state of joy.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, there are no shortcuts, and it's a very individualized process, as you said, because each one of us is very unique and has different experiences. But I found it to be a useful tool.
Yeah.
Because I find that when one is joyful, when one is happy, it could be in the presence of being in presence of kids, for instance. The ideas that I have, they just come out of a place of joy.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, maybe can I honor them later when I'm not in that state? And I find that maybe because you're in that joyful state, then life is being created from that place of joy, and not from a place of, if I do X, Y, and Z, then I will get to relax and be happy. Instead, you start from relaxation.
Yeah.